what's going on, guys and gals? Dat here with another NFL DraftKings picks video for week 13. I'm sorry I'm getting this video out super late. It's Saturday. I was up early working on the video, trying to get this out as soon as possible. I have no idea what happened over this week. Apparently neither does DraftKings, because they could not figure out why, for whatever reason, most of us didn't have access. It appeared to be a network issue. Basically what was happening is that I was trying to get into the DraftKings site to build my lineup, start doing my research, but it would not populate any of the players or the games for any of the slates. So I wasn't able to film or record or do anything. So, again, I do apologize about getting this out late to you guys. Just to give you a fair warning, this is going to be kind of a real quick recording. I didn't really have the time to go into a whole lot of detail about the players this week like I normally do. So let's just go ahead and get right into it. Okay, as always, we're going to start with quarterbacks. Josh McCown has been really solid over the past 6 weeks. He's averaging 21.4 DraftKings points and 17.5 points over this entire season. He seems to have finally settled in with the Jets offense. He's got his feet under him. The offensive line is offering really good protection, so he's comfortable in the pocket, and he just looks really solid. He's going to be going up against a deflated Kansas City Chiefs defense, which has been bad against the pass all season long, but have looked even worse as of late. You can stack McCown with Robbie Anderson, who is clearly his number one receiver, or if you're playing GPP and want to get sneaky, you can go with Jermaine Kearse or even Austin Seferian-Jenkins. The point being, McCown has a plethora of weapons at his disposal. Other plays I'm considering this week are going to be Phillip Rivers as the higher tier, more expensive option versus Cleveland. He will be highly owned in cash and GPP. And for another lower price, lower owned option, Blake Bortles at $5,400 versus the Colts is a good play as well. Okay, so now we're going to move on to running backs. Out of all the top tier running backs on the slate this week, I like Todd Gurley the best, with Fournette being a close second. Gurley tops Fournette for me because of his involvement in the pass game. This is a PPR, so if there is a running back who can rush for great numbers and he consistently gets passing targets out of the backfield, we have to target him. He's been relatively quiet over the past few weeks, solid, but quiet, which leads me to believe we are ready for a monster game. Don't get me wrong, he's racked up 100 yards from scrimmage in 8 of his last 11 games. No small feat. Last week, the Rams got into the red zone 3 times versus the Saints. Sean McVay opted to let Jared Goff pass for touchdowns instead of letting Gurley work, which was rather unusual. I think this time around, Gurley will see a lot more action, so we're going to plug him into the lineup. And for our second running back option, let's see here. I'm not too crazy about these guys up in the upper 6,000 range or the lower. Carlos Hyde seems like a pretty interesting option to me. He seems pretty solid. He got 21.5 points versus the Cardinals, 12.4 points versus the Giants. Should have been a lot more if you got 2 more rushing yards for the bonus. And 13.8 points versus the Seahawks. With the exception of the Giants, these are no pushover defenses by any means. Sure, he hasn't been getting into the end zone, but I ignore that column completely. I want the guys who get a really decent point total without any touchdowns. If they get in the end zone, that's just a bonus. This isn't FanDuel where you have to pick players that will get into the end zone to win. It's just not going to work that way on DraftKings. The stat line that I'm most interested in for PPR is targets. Hyde is being peppered with targets. The offensive line of the 49ers has just not been able to protect the quarterback, regardless of who that quarterback is, Brian Hoyer, CJ Beathard, or coming up with Garoppolo. So it's been a necessity for the quarterbacks to check down for their running backs on multiple occasions, and that's probably why Hyde's been peppered lately with these targets, and he's getting a lot of volume, and the numbers reflect that. At $5,900, he only needs to get about 15 points to meet value, and I think he can do that this week versus Chicago. So Hyde's going to be the one I go with here. Okay, so moving on to wide receivers. Usually I stack my quarterback with their number one wide receiver. Very rarely would I go with the wide receiver 2 on the depth chart unless the wide receiver 1 is going to be up against some top-rated cornerback like, Patrick Peterson or Xavier Rhodes or something along those lines. But I think we're pretty safe this time around, so I'm going to go with Robbie Anderson as my stack with Josh McCown. Anderson has been on a scoring streak over the past 5 weeks. He's getting a touchdown in each game. He's been peppered with targets. When you have a guy with big playability, great matchup, and low price, how could you not invest in that? Very little risk here, great upside, so Anderson's going to be in the lineup. Okay, so now we got Anderson in there. I really need to get some higher tier stud wide receivers in this lineup, and I think I'm going to go with either Mike Evans or DeAndre Hopkins. Let's take a look at them here, see what we got. Jameson Winston's going to be coming back against Green Bay, who's getting lit up in their secondary. Their defense hasn't been all that great. DeAndre Hopkins also has a good matchup here against the Titans, who are arguably just as bad in their secondary. I think both of these guys could have a really good day on Sunday. I think when it comes down to it, I think I'm going to end up going with DeAndre Hopkins. When Watson injured his ACL and Tom Savage was announced as the starter, I hit the brakes really hard on Hopkins at first, but it's now becoming clear that no matter who is in at quarterback for the Texans, Hopkins is going to see high volume targets. I mean, look at his target share over the past few weeks here. 10, 9, 14, 16, 11. Insanely high amount of targets on a consistent basis. Yeah, he doesn't always get into the end zone, but like I mentioned before, that's not the point. I want to see what a wide receiver will get me without a touchdown and base my choice off those numbers alone. I think Hopkins should be priced much higher given the matchup and volume, but fortune favors the wicked, so take advantage of it. Okay, and my last wide receiver slot, I think it's going to go to somebody lower priced here. Let's see what we got. Keep coming back to Marquise Lee. He hasn't been letting me down lately. He had that game last week against the Cardinals, but Patrick Peterson was on him the whole game, and I knew this was going to happen. He was going to be shut down, and that's exactly what happened. So I wasn't on him last week, but I think I'm going to be back on him this week. Marquise Lee is clearly the number one wide receiver option for Blake Bortles since Allen Robinson went down with a season-ending injury. I'm not worried about the questionable status. He's been playing through a minor knee injury that occasionally would limit him in practice, but he's yet to miss any games over it, so that doesn't bother me at all. It might leave a couple of casual players to shy away from him, so more power to us. Like I said, he got shut down by Patrick Peterson last week versus the Cardinals, so I think he may be lower owned by casual players, looking at his low total from last game, so we should be able to capitalize on that against the Colts defense, who's given up the third most points to wide receivers this year. He's shown great upside in the previous weeks, and I think he'll put up a solid number again this week, so we're going to go ahead and add Marquise Lee in here. As far as some other choices here that I've took a look at, and they seem to be pretty solid, I already mentioned Mike Evans, so I think he is a great pivot off of DeAndre Hopkins, if you want to try to save a little bit of salary there. I'm also looking at Devontae Adams. It would appear that Brett Hundley favors Adams above Randall Cobb and Jordy Nelson on the Packers, so I think that's a viable option as well. But I think this is going to be my wide receiver core here: Anderson, Hopkins, and Lee. So we'll move on to tight end here. All right, so tight end, as I said in my last video, my process for picking a tight end is pretty easy, and it goes as followed. Are the Browns or the Giants playing? Yes, they both are. What options are available to me? Hunter Henry or Jared Cook? Jared Cook is most likely going to be pretty heavily owned, with Michael Crabtree suspended and Amari Cooper most likely not going to play due to being in concussion protocol. I think Hunter Henry will be overlooked and lower owned, plus he saves you $700 in salary. I think I'm going to go with Henry, but I want to go on record saying I like both of them here, so it's your call. If you're paying up at other positions and you don't have the salary space available to get either of them, I also like Seals Jones as a GPP play. He came out of literally nowhere with 3 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks, so we have to pay attention to him. If you need to pay down for a tight end, consider him. I think he's a viable option as well. But if you're able to pay up for Hunter Henry or Jared Cook, by all means, go with either of them. I think they're great choices. Okay, at the flex position, I typically like to take a wide receiver here in the flex position, and I like to take them from the later games, like the 4 o'clock game or the 4:30 game on Sunday. Out of the choices available to me here, I have to go back to the Oakland game here versus the Giants. Again, with Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree both out this week. Like I mentioned before, the Raiders have a pretty good passing offense, even without those two. I mean, with Seth Roberts and Cordarrelle Patterson taking over. Going up against the terrible Giants defense, I feel comfortable plugging one of these guys into the lineup for this reason alone. Of the two, I find that Seth Roberts is the better choice. He played in 93% of the offensive snaps when Cooper was held out in Week 4. He should be running out of the slot in 3 wide formations with Patterson and Holton, but could also see playing time in 2 receiver sets as well. I think either one of them would be okay here, but of the two, I'm leaning more towards Roberts because of the snap percentage and the utility potential. So Seth Roberts is going to be my flex option here. Okay, and for defense, like I said, I don't really think about it. I just plug in a $3,000 defense and hope for the best. So it looks like we're going to go with either, let's see, the Broncos at $3,000, Miami at $29,000. They're playing each other. They're at Miami. Let's see, Jay Cutler's coming back in, so could be turnovers galore. I'm going to go with the Broncos here. So like I said, don't even think about it. Just plug in a $3,000 defense and hope for the best. Although if I did have to pay up this week, it'd probably be for the Chargers or the Jaguars, obviously. Under those chalk plays, I think the Bears are a viable option as well. And that's going to do it for Week 13. Thank you for watching. If you made it to the end of the video, as always, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter for more updates. And I also live tweet during the game, so you can hit me up. Let me know how you're doing. If you have any questions, always look forward to hearing from you guys. You guys killed the last video, got over 400 views. I think it was up to like 13 or 14 likes. Really, really good numbers. I really appreciate that. Let's try to do that again this week. Good luck in your lineups and have fun.